everyone coming out this morning. We haven't had too many mornings like this this winter, but it's a little messy out there, and I really appreciate everyone coming out for us this morning. And I further appreciate the hospitality of the Herkimer County Legislature for allowing us once again to use these chambers. And congratulations to Jim Bono on our new chair, and Doug Smith on your successful 10 years here. And, I kidded him earlier, he's back on the back row, he's back bencher here, but in all of you, the other legislators, department heads, and all of you that come here this morning. And Happy New Year to everyone. This is, as we begin a new year, a good opportunity to review some of the events of 2011 and also look ahead to priorities for 2012. This is part of a two-day tour of my Senate district. It takes me 2 days to get around the district. It's that large to talk about last year as well as our goals for 2012. You know, after a winning 2011, in my view, New York is once again a force to be reckoned with. The good news out of the Capitol in 2011 was that the legislature and the governor, and I give a lot of credit to Governor Cuomo here for not only providing leadership but also collaborating with the legislature in a partnership, working together, and I think that collaboration produced some results that were exceptional in 2011. You know, we facing a very difficult budget situation last year, $10 billion deficit. We cut state spending. We held the line on taxes and enacted some very aggressive economic development, job creation initiative. And we cannot lose that momentum in 2012. You know, this is the season of bowl games and football playoff games. And just like any sports team that takes an early lead, making the right halftime adjustments is key to victory. So in order for New York to come home a winner, we need to follow my keys for success in 2011. And my game plan focuses on economic development and regulatory relief for our business community, mandate relief for our local governments, reform of our education aid formula for our school districts, as well as continued flood recovery assistance. You know, the first key is economic development. These regional councils that were established last year by the governor, I think, are a great start, and I certainly strongly support another round of grants in 2012. But additional steps are needed to make New York a more business-friendly environment here. In order to attract new companies and assist existing businesses, over-regulation has to stop here in New York. You know, government red tape and unnecessary regulations are not the enhancements that the CEOs are looking for when they decide to open shop or to stay in a location. So some very specific ways that New York can boost our private sector job growth is substantial regulatory reform. Let's eliminate regulations that are negatively impacting economic development. You know, the governor has created, we have a mandate relief council, we have a Medicaid redesign team, and there are other entities, working groups that he has created. I say we need to have a regulatory reform entity that will include members of our business community, both large and small businesses, to assist us in our effort to eliminate some of these onerous regulations. We need to continue with tax credits for job creation, additional incentives for hiring particularly unemployed individuals, additional funding for broadband expansion in rural areas. I think the lack of broadband in some of our more rural areas of our state really holds those areas back because many people enjoy that rural way of life. But if you don't have broadband availability, which is important in this day and age of doing business and very important to people just in terms of the lifestyle, that hurts our rural areas. So whenever we can expand broadband, that's a good thing and big part of our economic development. We also need to continue funding for our agribusiness programs. I was very pleased in a tough budget year that we were able to make some restorations and proposed cuts to agriculture programs of our state last year, and we need to continue emphasis there. Of course, in addition to the tax environment, energy costs, and regulatory environment, the other concern that I hear from the business community is the properly educated and trained workforce. And so we are very fortunate in Herkimer County to have a community college, which is really on the forefront of training and retraining our workforce. And so I was delighted when the governor and the state mentioned the community colleges in particular, and we're fortunate to have a great asset like that in Herkimer County as well in terms of training and retraining our workforce. And we need to utilize that asset that we have. The next key to success is mandate relief for our local government. Last year, after many years of attempting this, a property tax cap was finally enacted into law. But without substantial mandate relief for local governments, this tax cap is like taking the football field with only half the team. It's only half of the job. Local governments and our school districts, they need meaningful mandate relief so they can continue to provide essential services and help to keep property taxes in check at the same time. And we have a number of county officials here today, and I would say let's start with what I call the mother of all mandates, and that is the Medicaid program. New York is one of the last remaining states in the union that has local governments, in this case county governments, funding a portion of the Medicaid program. Individual counties spend 30, 40, in Herkimer County's case, over 50% of the local tax levy strictly for the local share of the Medicaid program. That's simply unsustainable. If we're going to talk about helping the local governments, county governments with their budgets and keeping local taxes in check. And so that's exactly why I have signed on to legislation that would phase in a state takeover of the Medicaid program, taking that off the backs of our local governments. We would do this over an 8-year period because the impact on the state budget would be so great in 1 year. We have to phase it in. But year one starts with a freeze of the county's expenses in terms of Medicaid, and that is something that I want to bring home to our local counties this year. Let's start this year with a phase and with a freeze, and then we'll phase in after that. That alone would provide significant mandate relief for Herkimer County and the other counties of our state. It will free up local resources, help to lower taxes, and lead to, I think, better control of the program. This is a state program. It's just basically a bill for county governments. It's basically a state and federal program. I think that if the state were paying the local share for Medicaid, there would be even more interest at the state level in reforming the program and delivering these services in a more cost-effective way. Right now, when you can just shove off a good share of the costs off the county governments, there's not as much concern about the cost of the program, and that's got to change. Next, we need to have a constitutional amendment to allow the legislature to eliminate regulations that have been promulgated by our state agencies that place an undue financial burden on our local governments. Now, last year, a bill that I sponsored, which would do exactly this, overwhelmingly passed the Senate. Now, we have to get the Assembly on board this year as well. So mandate relief is key to our goals for 2012. We got to finish the job that we started with the tax cap, because the tax cap alone is not enough to provide the relief that's important. In fact, it makes life even more difficult for local governments without the mandate relief. And the third key to success in 2012 is in the area of education aid. Now, schools across the state are being asked to do more with less. We've had the last 2 years of actual cuts in aid to education. And now, let's face it, everyone can be more efficient. Everyone can tighten the belt. I'm not suggesting that life should go on as it always has in these times. But these 2 years of cuts have clearly exposed the inequities in terms of education aid in the state. You know, for wealthier areas of our state, when they get cuts in state aid for their school districts, sure, they may cut back. In those cases, it may be a ballet program or going from 5 down to 4 foreign languages. In many of our school districts, they are struggling to offer basic education, you know, for our students. And it clearly has shown that the current education aid formula is outdated and needs to be revamped. We need a level playing field so that each and every New York State student receives the tools they need to compete and succeed, no matter what their zip code is or what the wealth of their local community is. Now, I've joined about 15 other state senators. We've sent a letter to the governor last month urging him to address this issue in his budget that he will present to the legislature next week. And whether he does or not, we'll see on Tuesday afternoon. And then the ball will be in the legislature's court. And I have also signed on the legislation that would remove the cap and aid for low wealth districts. You know, it's I would say a very little secret in the state aid formula, which very few people can explain, the state aid formula for education. It's a very little secret in that formula that even there's a cap on the aid for low wealth districts, the very poor districts, and we have many in our region, low wealth districts, that they do not receive the state aid that they should be entitled to based on their low wealth because of the cap. And we'd like to see that removed so that the money will flow to where it is most needed, and that is in our low wealth district. That happens to be many districts in our region. Now, the governor last week talked about appointing an education commission to look at such things as teacher accountability and student achievement, and these are all important to look at. But also, we need to get this issue of the state aid formula on the table as well. And the fourth key for 2012 is in flood recovery. You know, last year we saw Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee devastated our state. I have parts of my district that were really wiped out in some communities, and lives have been altered. We sustained damage right here in some of our communities right in Herkimer County. And the New York state response was, I think, very immediate and comprehensive. You know, there have been grant programs to help families rebuild their lives, or businesses to reopen, and local governments to rebuild their damaged infrastructure. But the recovery is long-term and will take some time. And some steps were taken during the special session last month, but more needs to be done. Under the FEMA aid that comes to the state and local governments to help with rebuilding infrastructure, there is a local share, 12.5% of any expenses is on the local government's backs. We need to remove that burden from our local governments. We did it back in 2006, and we need to do it again this year. Now, I'm also sponsoring legislation that would offer an income tax credit for those who have suffered substantial storm damage and are still paying property taxes on, in some cases, property that has been severely damaged or doesn't even exist anymore in some extreme cases. That needs to be part of the package as well. So I know right here in Herkimer County, we have some chronic flood areas that it seems that year after year we sustain flood damage. And that is why I have developed legislation that would create a flood mitigation program run by DEC. We need to beef up our efforts in New York State to proceed with flood mitigation so that we can avoid some of these damages. Why sustain this damage year after year? Let's take the steps that are necessary to mitigate the flood-prone areas, take the steps that are necessary to protect the people and property. That's a chronic problem in certain areas of Herkimer County, and I would like to see us, as we learn from some of the real devastation, severe devastation of last year, we need to take corrective action so we don't see this damage year after year. Unfortunately, these 100-year floods are happening about every 5 years of late, and so we need to take action. You know, along with my 4 keys, we also need to focus on such things as additional steps to cut down on insurance fraud. As chair of the Senate Insurance Committee, we'll be keying in on more aggressively attacking insurance fraud. Every one of us that purchases auto insurance, for example, it's estimated that we're paying for every policy about $100 more than we need to because of fraudulent claims. It's primarily a downstate issue, but we all pay because of the fact that too many fraudulent claims are being paid out because of the lack of tools to cut down on the amount of fraud. In some parts of the downstate region, this is practically a cottage industry, but more than that. It's a big industry in some cases of insurance fraud, particularly in the auto area. We need to take steps to cut down on this fraud because we are all paying more than we need to for insurance because of it. We also need to improve our upstate roads and bridges. The governor's talking about another initiative in this area. We are long overdue for an upstate road and bridge program in the state, in our state system, and also helping local governments with their systems as well. 3 years ago, there were some steps taken to help the MTA down in the urban area of the state with their MTA issues, with their transit issues. But unlike what has happened in previous years, we never at the same time addressed our upstate roads and bridges. That's got to change, and hopefully we can work together to make that happen this year. We need to repeat last year's success in terms of our budget process. You know, finish the job on time as we did this year. Unlike a $10 billion deficit, we are looking at about a $2 billion deficit this year. But we need to close that without new taxes, fees, or borrowing, because that does help our business climate if we don't simply raise taxes in New York State. We need to continue to trim government spending and consolidate where possible. You already, because of action taken last year, we created the Department of Financial Services. That we combined the insurance department and the banking department in New York, and I was involved in negotiating that. And we're seeing savings already, and we need to do more of that at the state level. The governor has this SAGE Commission, Spending and Government Efficiency Commission. They've offered several more recommendations on further consolidations at the state level, and including was the bringing DOT, the Thruway Authority, and the Bridge Authority, which handles the bridges up and down the Hudson. They all perform basically the same functions, at least very similar, and we can cut down on some administrative expenses if they are consolidated. That's something that I have long suggested, and the SAGE Commission has gotten on board here. And once again, I think we can deliver services to the people of the state of New York in a more efficient way and help our budget deficit at the state level. So in 2011, the legislature and the governor worked together, and we proved that, once again, that Albany can produce a winning team. Now it's time to make the right adjustments, follow my keys to success, and show that New York is once again a franchise to be reckoned with. And in addition to New York as a whole to become a franchise to be reckoned with, Herkimer County as well. Because I believe that right here locally, with the Medicaid changes I'm suggesting, the freeze this year, and ultimate state takeover, that will help Herkimer County in a big way, because you are over 50% of your local tax levy just goes to Medicaid alone. I know that our local schools, their consolidation, merger issue is a big one here in the valley, and the schools up to the south and the north in the county struggle as well. The education funding changes that I'm recommending would be a big help, whether the schools merge or not. Many of the same funding issues and inequities exist, and we need to change that. This is the year. We're going to work as a team, as I have in the past, with the county and our economic development and IDA office. Let's get some action over in the 5S South. Is that what we call it? I still call it Pumpkin Patch. 5S South.
Also known as the Pumpkin Patch.
That's right, affectionately known as the Pumpkin Patch. I think this is the year to get some action over there. As well as there's a great need in this county for enriched senior housing, assisted living housing for our senior citizens. And I hope to work with folks here in the county to help make that happen, because that's a great need as I see it for us in Herkimer County. So there's a lot on the agenda. I look forward to a busy year, and I appreciate you all being in the room here today, because I feel we have a great partnership in Herkimer County, and better collaboration as we've seen at the Capitol, continued collaboration here locally, we can make some good things happen in 2012, and I look forward to working with all of you. So with that, if any members of the press have any questions, or comments, does Jim Wallace have any questions? Well, we'll be around after if you'd like to get into some of these issues. And but anybody else have? This is dangerous to open it up too much. Yes, Fred.
You mentioned the flood mitigation that you're working on. Is there any way that could be tied into the flooding that's like from Middleville, Newport, Poland? You know, they had quite a bit of flooding up there. Middleville had like 3 floods in the last 2 years.
Right.
Is there any way that can be worked out to correct some of these problems?
That's exactly the intent of what I'm talking about. The fact is, as you point out, we have, there are flood-prone areas. You have it up in that region of our county, and then you got, Moyer Creek and the others Steel Creek and Moyer, two that come to mind, Fulmer too, you know, they're flood-prone areas, and I know, you know, Army Corps of Engineers looked a few years ago, but we need to key in on, rather than just sustaining this damage and, you know, appealing to FEMA to come in and help and so on an ongoing basis, let's take steps to eliminate the problem. I mean, obviously we need, you know, obviously the engineering, and we need to, I don't sit here and propose to know exactly what needs to happen, but I do know that I think it's bad public policy just simply to sustain this damage over and over again when we should be keying in on taking the corrective action. And those are the areas exactly, as you point out, that I think are, would benefit from what I'm suggesting here. Well, again, thank you all for coming by this morning. We look forward to a busy and productive year, and I look forward to working shoulder to shoulder with all of you as we meet the challenges ahead and produce results for our mutual constituents here in Herkimer County and Mohawk Valley. So thank you all very, very much.